Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of Supply Chain Talk. Our main topic today is smart supply chain optimization, turning trade-offs into payoffs. My name's Alistair Chowton, your host this week. The format is as it always is, where we'll start with a brief discussion of a news story, and then we'll move on to the main topic. Before I introduce my guests, a reminder to do join in on the chat in the chat box on your screens, and also I think if you're online on LinkedIn watching there, you can also comment there, though not so easy for us to pick up those ones. We'll try and address as many comments as we can and questions you may raise. And for the contributions we find most useful, there is the normal Supply Chain Talk mug to be given out. So do join in. So without further ado, let me welcome my first guest, who is Lukasz Ziba from High Logic. Lukasz is head of strategy there and has spent the last 20 years in progressive roles as IT and operations practitioner in advanced planning software and now in consulting. He's the father of two small children and moved from cold Poland to warm Spain during COVID, and perhaps understandably hasn't left since. And he's recently discovered kite surfing as his passion. So welcome, Lukasz. I mentioned I was just in Warsaw only 10 days ago, and Poland's a great place. So I'm sure you're torn between your homeland and sunny Spain.
Everybody, yes, sir.
Our second guest is Daniel Mielke, who is head of supply chain in the UK for CAF, which stands for Construcciones y Auxilia de Ferrocarriles. He has close on 20 years of experience in end-to-end supply chain leadership and is recognized for delivering operational excellence, commercial value and scalable transformation across multinational organizations. And when he isn't optimizing supply chains, he can be found playing chess, usually winning until somehow he isn't. The frustration of chess, it can turn very quickly, can't it? Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Alistair. Hi, Lucas. Nice to be here.
Great. And our third guest is Dwayne Smith, who is Senior Product Manager for Business Solutions at Kinaxis. He has more than 20 years of experience where he's been helping organizations unlock value through supply chain planning strategies, including mathematical optimization designed to meet real business needs. Outside of work, he's an avid sailor who has twice captained a sailboat from Vancouver up the rugged Pacific coast to Alaska, navigating iceberg-studded waters, hurricane-force winds, and calving glaciers. So that sounds amazing adventures. And Dwayne is indeed based in Vancouver. I don't know if it's turned really cold yet or still waiting for winter to come.
Still waiting for winter, thankfully.
Right. Good. So welcome all three of you. And let's now look at our news item this week, which is UK retail sales drop unexpectedly as shoppers await Black Friday and the budget. So this was an article in last week's Guardian newspaper in the UK by journalist Mark Sweeney. And the subhead is that supermarkets, clothing stores, and online mail order firms suffer sales declines as consumers delay purchases. It's very timely because, of course, it's Black Friday. Well, it's not actually Black Friday yet, officially, but it's Black Friday week or Black Friday month, increasingly the case. And also the budget has been announced, or literally in the past few hours in the UK. And there was a lot of trepidation because there was an awful lot of stories being leaked and shared of what's going to happen. Is income tax up or down, or allowances worse, and what other things might hit people? So all of that, the article reports with lots of different statistics, means that UK retailers suffered unexpectedly depressed sales last month in October as shoppers were waiting for Black Friday deals and were uncertain about the budget. There are lots of different statistics, hard to interpret because, in a way, some things, supermarket sales were down by 1.1%, which you could say is less discretionary, whereas clothing, footwear, and textile stores posted a 3.3% month-on-month drop in sales, which is more significant and I guess more discretionary spending. So I think to me, what struck me was the two issues really is that are people delaying spending because they're waiting to see what the UK budget will bring? I think definitely for big ticket items that might have been the case. And I guess that raises the challenge related to our subject today of how do you forecast this year if you're relying on past year's performance, past year's history, what happens in November when this time we've got a difference of a budget. And secondly, people not shopping so much in October because they're waiting for Black Friday deals, which, certainly to me sort of kind of indicates the negative impact of Black Friday. I mean, we already recognize that it causes a huge spike for many retailers. They just kind of making that enormous spike by people waiting, and then all the special offers supposedly come along, and that puts huge pressure on. Yeah, just on the whole business, particularly e-commerce distribution centers. Turning to you, Lukash, what struck you most about this story?
I think what's interesting about it is the change in consumer behavior. So for me, on one hand side, we see consumers more and more reacting to tweets, to different online events that are happening, right? And but on the other hand side, adjusting or getting used to the demand shaping behaviors that used to be very successful, and now they just become like demand shifting, right? When you're shifting demand from October to end of November because you
Mm,
anticipate this. And finally, majority of the demand forecasting models that we will talk about maybe a little bit later on, they're all like history dependent or heavily
mhm.
relying on historical data. There's simply no chance for these models to be able to react at the pace of consumer.
Yeah. Okay. So it certainly reinforces the challenge there. Daniel, what did you think about that news story?
Yeah, I mean, since Labour came to power last year, I think that the intentions are good. We had several years of conservative government in place,
Mm,
and they tried to best to manage the budget. I think one, if I may even comment, a funny point today is I made some notes here that some demand planners that were they really switched on, probably managed to adjust the forecast quite quickly because of this leak of the information that was released by accident a few hours before the formal announcement. On the other hand, um, some retailers, like Amazon, they do use different algorithms. They're more, let's say, better prepared for this kind of events. So, for example, the Black Friday is not something new in the UK. Is becoming more and more common. And the likes of Amazon, they do have a specific range of products and volumes allocated for these events. In relation to the flip side of the coin, I've seen some of the news as well. For example, the group Kingfisher that owns B&Q and Screwfix actually is betting on this lower level consumption and the rise in living costs to probably expecting people to stay more at home, like what happened in COVID, and spend more in DIY products. So Kingfisher actually is betting on this lower consumption for them for their own benefit. They even adjusted the profit warnings recently, a couple of days ago, expecting consumers to stay more at home,
mm.
not selling the property so much, and probably supporting their profitability expectations for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that as you say, some not all retailers suffer exactly the same sort of changes in demand, and I guess it sort of reinforces that you really need to understand how your business is affected by different changes. It may be negative for some people, but positive for you, and vice versa. So yeah, interesting point there. And Dwayne, what did you think about this about the news story there?
Absolutely. I think ultimately uncertain consumer behavior causes a lot of issues for the retail supply chain as well. How do you keep goods on the shelves
Mm,
if you oversell your forecast, and what happens to those goods when the forecast is undersold? And so all of this drives to the agility that manufacturers have to abide by. They have to be able to react quickly to what actually happens. But even before we know what exactly happens, we have to take some guesses. We have to have some scenarios to play out and be prepared for that agility. So being able to react in the moment isn't always about just reacting extremely quickly, faster than anyone else. There's an element to that, but it's about having considered plans in advance. If
mm,
certain categories of products take off, if other categories drop, there's a whole host of changes that will happen to the requirements within the supply chain, and how do
mm.
manufacturers react to that while maintaining their profitability and keeping consumer shelves full, or at least enough that someone can take it off the shelf.
Yeah, yeah. But of course, what the news item is referring to is, really quite short-term things. And I think, Daniel, it was interesting, just in case viewers weren't aware, but in the UK, somehow the Office for Budget Responsibility, one of the sort of key government departments, managed to leak a whole lot of detail of the budget sort of several hours before it was formally announced. And there's going to be hell to pay for that for sure. But I guess if you're sort of trading the markets and the stock markets and financial indices, hour by hour, minute by minute, advantage of knowledge is huge. But in the case of kind of retailers, we're working on patterns of weeks, typically months, when you've got Far East supply chains for textiles and so on. So I guess it's a very different one. And I suppose there is also that strategy of just saying, look, when we sell out, we sell out, and fashion retailers like Zara are kind of quite well known for that. They keep rotating products, bring them in, and if you don't move fast, you won't get it, and there's a risk you won't get the product you want. So lot of different strategies there. So probably at this point, let's move to our main discussion topic, which is smart supply chain optimization, turning trade-offs into payoffs. I guess we'll pick up the agility point and forecasting points in a moment, because our first agenda item is slightly different in that it's balancing cost, service, and sustainability to unlock new sources of value. And to me, I guess, everyone's familiar with the sort of cost versus service trade-off. Classically, it's, if you want to increase your inventory levels, you're going to have fewer stockouts, but that brings quite a cost in terms of the inventory investment and the risk of having too much inventory. But I'm interested to sort of get your thoughts on how sustainability fits in now, and how that can create new sources of value. So Lukasz, did you have any thoughts on or examples of that?
So yes, I think when optimizing, I think one of the key questions you're going to ask yourself is, what is really the objective function that I
Mm,
want to consider, and that's getting the output right is probably the longest discussion. It's much longer discussion than any mathematical exercise, data exercises you'll be
mm,
having there. What we have found is that, frankly, sustainability as a word does not translate well to objective functions, or
mm,
is not taking a higher enough role in the priority when we talk with our clients. So what needs to be done is you have to break down the sustainability into hard business terms,
mhm,
in terms of reduction of obsolescence, for example, right? Which is the unused products that you have produced and you are unable to sell, and through that argue the sustainability angles, right? So, for example, in one case that we have done, we have been analyzing with our customers what is the incremental value of bringing new products onto the
mhm,
market that will drive extra revenue versus what is the trade-off of obsolescence and having to write off the products that will be no longer sold on the shelf in this or the other market. And we've used mathematical reasoning to provide this objective function and to provide this benefit. And basically, that was claimed both as a kind of cost saving or waste
mm.
reduction and sustainability achievement.
Okay, that's a really interesting example. And as you say, I mean, for some areas of sustainability, like I know vehicle miles and fuel, it's pretty straightforward. An objective function is minimize my miles and minimize my sort of vehicle use, minimize my number of vehicles, and therefore clearly that's a sustainable goal, and it's a very easy one to, not easy, but it's a very clearly defined one to optimize. But as you say, in kind of the retail inventory space, that's a bit harder. Daniel, what are your thoughts on how sustainability fits into this trade-off these days?
Sustainability, I think, is one of the biggest challenges every company is facing. Is about reporting to shareholders that initiatives are being put in place. On the other hand, not to lose profitability. And for me, try to balance all those three main objectives at the same time becomes a challenge. So for me, it's all about then where to focus on. And for me, that's one word that summarizes everything: is segmentation. And
Mm,
probably you're thinking, why segmentation? Because we need to understand if the activities a given organization is carrying out are really delivering value. For example, is the customer base optimized? Have you, do we understand which ones are what they call the cash cows, they deliver the 80% of the revenue? Which ones are the ones actually that are just a tail, not delivering anything? The same for the
Mm,
customer portfolio, the product portfolio. Do we
mm,
have the customer portfolio optimized? Really, do we understand the segmentation? And maybe you need to go beyond the normal Pareto analysis. Instead of A, B, C, you need to go A, B, C, and D, and split C into two different parameters. And C is 3% and 2 is D, and really focus on the D and remove the tail.
mm,
It supports the company's objectives in terms of rationalization and also sustainability, because you'll be shipping less products, generating less CO2, consuming less fuel as well, and delivering optimized products. But then there's a huge array of other initiatives that need to be put in place as well. This is just the beginning. If we think about as well, do we have an optimized S&OP process? Our factories are producing just for complying with manufacturing KPIs, not really considering all the aspects. So there are a huge array of factors that need to be taken in consideration. For example, as a practical example, in the previous company I worked for, one of the previous companies I worked for, there was obviously we had this plastic tax in the UK that came in effect quite recently, and marketing and sales were trying to optimize the products, just focusing on the products being recyclable in terms of how much plastic was on them. And then we decided to do a more broad project, saying, okay, what about not considering palletization? How many products can we fit in a pallet to optimize
mm.
truck loading, warehouse efficiency, not only reduce packaging as well. So the whole project was successful. We even managed to lower logistics cost per ton, improve on-shelf availability for customers, for key retailers as well. So it's
Mm.
when you talk of sustainability is a much broad range of parameters and factors that you need to
Yeah.
consider.
That's really interesting examples there, Daniel. I suppose it just raises the thing that on the one hand, you've got some demand from consumers for sustainability, but things like, the number of miles you drive your products around, it's hard perhaps to sort of communicate that in a really competitive and compelling way to consumers. But certainly when you have, external incentives like, taxes and so on, which definitely really focus on not just vehicle miles and fuel and things like that, but also start to really raise your whole product portfolio and product makeup. So that's a really interesting example. Dwayne, what sort of things are you seeing with your customers? Because I'm sure you're working with loads of different retailers and manufacturers.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think ultimately there's divergent policies between
Mm,
across the pond, I guess. And Europe is really taking a leadership in sustainability. And I think critically, when we're looking at different options, optimization really becomes a critical aspect for sustainability because you can do things more efficiently, and that's something that has been touched on uh, by by others today. But the one of the aspects is there are small trade-offs that you can do that are incrementally just a little bit more expensive, but have enormous savings from a sustainability standpoint. So how do you find those most effective trade-offs where there are some things that in order to save on the CO2 emissions or at least equivalent emissions, they're extremely expensive. Other things are almost free. So, in terms of optimizing for a business, okay, purely looking at cost-driven aspects without a sustainability costing in there, leads to things that are maybe extremely inefficient from a sustainability standpoint. So, just including those trade-offs can have an enormous impact while only increasing the costs slightly. And so, I think that's a really exciting element to sustainability. There's a curve essentially
mm,
where as you decrease more and more the CO2 emissions or at least equivalent emissions, the cost goes up incrementally, just a little bit, then a little bit more, and then you get into a steep part. But many organizations for almost nothing can save quite a few uh, emissions, can save quite a few trees
mm,
by just making small changes. And so I think
mm.
that's really critical. It may not be the most obvious, most emotionally relevant thing to do. It can be just some very, very simple things choosing a different mode of transport, sourcing from a different country that has cleaner components that are going into something, cleaner materials that they're bringing in, and is maybe just a few percent more expensive, but makes an enormous difference. So I think that's a really exciting aspect to sustainability and optimization together.
Great. No, thank you, Dwayne. Those are some great insights there. We've got some interesting questions, actually. Maybe let's just sort of quickly sort of whiz around and just fit those in before we get to our next discussion point. So we've had Elise Morgan asking, when companies talk about improving their supply chain, do you think they sometimes start in the wrong place? What's a realistic first step? So I don't know if one of you wants to comment on that one, or a first step for starting optimization.
Yeah, I think a major element to improving the supply chain ultimately is understanding the current status of the supply chain. Often there's disconnected systems, and even just providing visibility to the overall end-to-end supply chain so that different groups are able to share the same information and understand changes that I might make, how that would impact other teams and other groups within the organization. And so I think that's really a key element. And it's a pretty simple analogy, but if we think of a Rubik's Cube and solving a Rubik's Cube, many customers of ours start out by each person having 6 different Rubik's Cubes.
Mhm.
Lucas solves his, Daniel solves his, and I solve mine. And I might be solving for green, and we each have a wonderful color, but we never looked at what happened to the other sides of the Rubik's Cube as I optimized for my color. And so by bringing the different teams together into a single platform to enable that visibility, we all get to look at the Rubik's Cube together and understand, as I do this, how does it impact other
Mm.
teams within the
Mm.
organization? So that is a wonderful starting point, and being able to build optimization on top of that while understanding the whole picture.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
so
great. Yeah.
just to build on this, Dwayne's point, at least whenever we come to the clients, they exactly know what hurts. Okay, there is no advanced diagnostic needed, which part of the room is on fire. So Dwayne's point, like the art of it is not to solve the small part and throw the rest out of balance. I'd
Mm.
rather try to come up with a solution that is actually getting them sustainably above the line.
Yeah, no, thank you. And let's actually, Daniel, perhaps you'd like to have a look at Sandra's question, which is how to build an we touched on a little bit how you measure things and so on. How do you build an optimization model that measures accurately the value of a sustainable choice against short-term cost implications? So it is that trade-off, isn't it? You can source more locally, but it might be more expensive. And how do you kind of measure the sustainable advantages versus the additional product costs for sake of argument? Is that something you've dealt with?
Yes, potentially indirectly, but yes, and I'll try to combine both questions in the same answer. First of all, when you talk about, because they are correlated anyway, when you talk about supply chain, improved supply chain, I think the first aspect is do our managing directors, commercial directors, sales directors, do understand what supply chain is, what in the supply chain is not, and what functions are part of supply chain? Because if you have different parts of supply chain, could be order management, could be production planning, reporting to different parts of the organization, there's no synchronized effort being taking place. I think it relates what Dwayne was saying before. And I think this is the first step, understand and what your company understand what supply chain is, because it has to be a coordinated effort. So that's
Mm.
why we tend to establish different what they call checkpoints in relation to the process. Could be forecast accuracy, because for the wrong forecast will bring the wrong products in, and then you'll be increasing your carbon footprint because you'll be producing and shipping things that you actually don't need, actually even storing things you don't need. Could be as well manufacturing scheduling adherence. Are you producing according to the forecast or according to some specifications or requirements from high up in the chain? And as well, transportation costs, warehousing costs, all of these are linked in terms of
Mm.
trying to make a sustainable choice is about objectives. So is the company try to be more reliable in front of the customers, more responsive, more agile? And also trying to bring the 3 views of supply chain that I keep talking about. People that know me already, they get a bit sick and tired of hearing. It's increased visibility, decreased variability, and I always forget the last V. It's increase velocity, decrease variability, and I'll come back to it. I will come back. I always
Okay.
forget my third V, but anyway. So
Okay.
how to build this optimization model is understand the company's objectives, the company strategy, link the supply chain strategy to those strategies the company wants to go through, and develop the plans to go through it. It's more difficult to implement this than you think, because I'm
Yeah.
working in separate projects to optimize carbon emissions or CO2 emissions, and that so many elements that are part of it that need to be extended to other parts of the business.
Mm.
How to make a supply chain to effectively turn an environment trade-off. You need to align the supply chain strategy with the company strategy in the first place, and then develop some plans to decrease the parameter, the KPI that we want to achieve. I think that's very important. Make sure that everyone understands that we are trying to go in the same direction by applying then the plan all together, not working silos. I think that was Dwayne
Yeah.
or Lucas as well that touch base on that.
Okay, no, thank you, Daniel. Well, that leads nicely actually to our second discussion point, which is embedding optimization across planning, sourcing, and production to drive agility. And I guess this is all around end-to-end optimization, which is a goal we all strive for. But I think as we recognise that there's always the risk of individual sort of areas of the supply chain sub-optimizing. I think it's a bit like the sort of the separate Rubik cubes. Not everyone's looking at the whole picture. And I'm sure we've all seen it. I've seen it often. Where manufacturing say, well, we just want to make huge production runs so we don't have any changeover costs, and sourcing say, hey, we got a great deal. Sorry, we bought you 2 years worth of inventory, but it's a great price. So those are the extremes, obviously. But I guess the question is how do you, achieve that end-to-end view of optimization? So, Lukasz, your thoughts on that one?
I'll be maybe controversial, and I would say majority of the cases we see, there's no such thing as end-to-end optimization.
Okay, that's certainly a controversial view. Yeah.
There is an end-to-end alignment, and let's call it synchronization of
Hmm.
decisions. But where we see actual optimization, by optimization, I mean arriving at close to mathematical optimum decision.
Mm.
That type of optimization, we see it providing disproportional value, handling unique sub-industry problems, not generic supply chain problems. Okay,
Mm.
so let's say you're a dairy manufacturer and
Mm.
you have cows, and the cows produce different proportion of fat and protein, whether it's summer or winter.
Mm.
And you have to know if you are making yogurt or butter or something else, and you want to optimize this process. That's a sub-industry process that disproportionately impacts your bottom line, and that makes sense to go into that precision and mathematical optimum. Okay, like the same for semiconductors. There's this problem statement, right, and others. And this is where we see where we come and we optimize. Companies get huge value, and they
Mm.
are able to lead the pack and be like, let's say, ahead of the curve. When we come to a customer that wants like has a generic problem and says, please optimize this to me,
Mm.
when you peel the onion, you actually realize the problem is not an optimization problem. It's a functional alignment problem, much more, right? It's a data problem perhaps, but you never arrive at saying, okay, I have to science this to maximum, right? To use the maximum sense to solve this. So
Yeah.
my answer would be where optimization makes sense is disproportionately valuable, is in the sub-industry specific problems, where everywhere else the trade-off between cross-functional alignment is much more worthwhile to get the cross-functional alignment than try to optimize the silo.
Great. No, thank you, Lukesh. And it's an interesting point you make. I guess it is, being realistic in what to aim for. And I think, Dwayne, you were touching on earlier on the fact that, and I've come across this many supply chain trade-offs. There's a curve. It either goes up and rounds off and then goes down, or it sort of, starts gently and then becomes very expensive. A bit like setting your inventory levels. You can get, 97%, 98% cost you so much. If you want to get to 99.9%, that extra fraction, it's just kind of goes exponentially your cost. So I guess it's understanding, where you are in that optimization sort of range. Are you getting reasonably close, in which case it'll do, or do you need to try and go for absolutely the perfect optimization? So it's a great point, Lukash. Daniel, what are your thoughts on this end-to-end optimization?
I just don't want to leave today without my three V's of supply chain. Make sure that everyone understands it's decrease variability, increase visibility, and increase velocity. It's okay. That's
Okay.
off of my back now. But there's being controversial as well with Lucas. Yes, we need to think about end-to-end supply chain as element. There are elements of that. One of them is planning, another one is production, and another one is sourcing. So we need to ensure that there's an alignment between all these activities, and you have a strong supply base, a reliable customer forecast, that then you can synchronize all these activities across the organization. And distribution as well is quite important. So what's important as well, not treat all these different KPIs as isolated cases, but coordinate and connect them. I'm not sure if that's what Lucas tried to refer to, but there's an element of coordination, but for me, it's an element of connection. We need to connect those KPIs across planning, production, distribution, sourcing, to ensure that everyone is working in a certain cadence to deliver what you need to deliver. So if it's a customer service level that you need to achieve is 98%, because anything above that, you need to have an enormous amount of inventory that's not financially possible. So if it's 98.5 customer service level, how are we going to coordinate all these elements across the supply chain to achieve that? And I think one of the issues I've seen over and over again in many companies is that lots of emphasis in terms of customer forecasting, lots of emphasis in terms of manufacturing scheduling adherence, lots of emphasis in distribution requirements, KPIs, but the supplier base, having a reliable supply base sometimes is overlooked. And that's something I've been working quite a lot, particularly in the company I'm working right now, because we need to be reliable. We cannot have, for example, train stop, and that's the rail industry I'm working now. But on the other hand, I realized quite quickly that the supplier base is not reliable, mainly because we need to make it be smart in relation to contracts. So suppliers need to be accountable as well. So there's a whole spectrum that we need to address. As I said, I'm going to repeat myself: planning, production, sourcing, distribution, but also the coordination, the alignment of the KPIs to achieve a common objective. And again, coming back to what I said before, having all these different areas working silos, everyone work for their own objectives and KPIs, normally don't deliver what you need to deliver.
Yeah, no, thank you, Daniel. And I think that mention of KPIs is interesting. It's, KPIs in terms of the business performance, but also how KPIs are used to incentivize people. And again, I'm sure we've all been there. If your procurement department is just incentivized on the supposed gross margin that they achieve, they're just going to buy lots at the cheapest price from the cheapest supplier, and who cares about the consequences? Being a bit simplistic. So Dwayne, again, your thoughts on this one, and how do KPIs and incentives sort of help achieve the best results in end-to-end optimization?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, all planners are human. All planners management is human, and they'll follow incentives in many cases. So the alignment of KPIs is critical. And as you mentioned, if procurement is incented on or their incentives don't consider the inventory carrying costs of their decisions, they're going to go after greatest efficiency from a cost perspective of the purchase. As soon as you align the KPIs of understanding, okay, well, what does it do from an inventory storage potential obsolescence perspective? Aligning the KPIs across the organization is really key, so that even if we are planning to make specific decisions within sort of an area of the supply chain, making sure that those decisions are using information from just the downstream systems, and understanding the overall implications to the organization. So that's one thing. I think having a sort of an end-to-end single optimization run works only for extremely aggregate decisions, setting long-term strategy. Okay? As we get to more tactical plans, we do need to have independent optimizations to run decisions that might be day by day, and not take 24 hours or 48 hours to run a comprehensive solve. They'd be able to do things in 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever that may be. to get real-time decisions that are valuable while still considering those KPIs across the organization. So coordinated inputs,
Mm.
planning in a system where at least, even though I am solving for my orange color of the Rubik's Cube, I am able to understand the implications across the organization. And so I think that's really being able to see everything together, understand the implications of what you're doing, coordinate those KPIs, not necessarily solve in one giant monolithic solve.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great insight actually, because of course, yeah, your procurement decisions and guiding those, how much do you buy, especially on a long lead time. Well, that's it. You made the purchase. Once you've made that purchase and you got the stock, then it's a totally different level of decision and timing to say, well, where does that product go? Which warehouses, which stores do you want to send it to? So, a great example there. Um, so let's move to our third point, which is turning data-driven insights into coordinated, scalable action across the supply chain. And I suppose, how do we turn that data into action at different timescales as well? And I myself often think in terms of transformation and making things happen of people, process, and systems. It's not just the system, of course. So interested to get your views on what are the critical success factors. Are there areas that organizations overlook? But also really interesting to pick up on AI, I think here. And at least some came back with another interesting question about, what's the way for companies to practically use, for example, AI and other supply chain tools to make those decisions. And Lukash, I can see you've already commented back to Elise. But yeah, so if you want to bring in AI as part of making data-driven insights turn into action, great. Or is it more AI making those decisions in the first place? So Lukash, over to you.
So I think this is very practical. I mean, I treat it as a very practical question. And what we believe is that, first of all, you have to think in decisions. I mean, yes, planners are humans, but essentially they take decisions. Like planning is the function where input is data, output is decisions, and that's it, right? There's no physical movement anywhere there. And I think we believe that 99, like a big portion of data is already available to be making these decisions automatically.
Mhm.
We think that what is missing is extracting implicit knowledge from the planner's know-how and understanding of the business and the business rules to be able to do that. The current, like if you think about AI from the perspective of Gen AI, LLM models, they are unable to do this. But there are different other types of machine learning AI which are more towards pattern recognition, which are already able to derive the patterns in the decisions made in the past, show them to you and say, hey, is this the rationale you had in mind when you took this decision, right? And then you can kind of score it yes or no, yes or no, yes or no.
Mm.
And in this
Mm.
way, you can train the networks to take the decisions, right? And I think people always imagine there is and then LLMs are very data hungry
Yeah.
and compute hungry that we know. But I think for the simple planning decisions that are being taken, we already have all the data. We have the inputs, we have the outputs. All we need is a pattern recognition approach that can help us have that conversation with the system before we
Mm.
train it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought about pattern recognition and using data because I guess the potential for AI is it can look at a totally different level of data. The exact timing of transactions in your stores. Are people buying a little bit more in the morning? Are they? There's just so much data that's there, which in the past just impossible. It was enough when you suddenly had every store, every product, every transaction, every basket. That it just was a huge amount of data compared to what had been before. But
I
to get
think
to that, it's
I
yeah.
think to build on your point, Alistair, and to something that Daniel said in the beginning, we had this traditional segmentation models that you have A, B, C, D, maybe, but with the advanced model, like with advanced thinking, you can have like hundreds of thousand microsegments that
Mm,
would track
yes.
and this is incomprehensible for a human. But
Yes.
if you
Yeah.
have a digital planning algorithm is no problem, right? To have so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
clusters and to kind of have a different pattern for each cluster. And I think this is where the future is, like the micro segmentation, pattern
Yes.
recognition.
Yeah. Daniel, what are your thoughts on how best to turn data-driven insights into action?
I'll try to circle back what I mentioned before, and thanks,
Mm.
Lucas, for mentioning about segmentation. I think the many companies these days trying to implement AI, but trying to optimize something that's not basically fit for purpose. And why I'm being so direct and controversial, because as I said, we need to do some homework first. So make sure that we have the right portfolio, the right customer base, and then you can implement those tools to optimize and machine learning. Otherwise, machine learning will just learn some things that should not be learning anyway. And
Mm,
say, okay,
mm.
it's normal to have all these items delivering minus 40% margin. No, no, we need to do some work first. And then what to be potentially the right sequence? If you think about, that you made an analogy that I use quite a lot as well: people, technology, and processes. So do we have the right processes as well? Is machine learning going to overcome this? No. So if you have people in technology and have a little bit of an issue there, so we might have automated chaos if you have a deficiencies there. People in
Mm.
processes, if you have deficiencies there, we have frustration. Process and technology, we have alienation. So what would be potentially the right path to follow? Make sure the processes are right. Make sure that your portfolio of customers and products are optimized. Make sure the people are there to ensure that the machine will learn something from experience as well. And then implement the technology. For me, it will be the one of the sequences I would follow: processes, people, and technology. Technology
Yeah.
will come. Is here actually. Sorry,
Yes.
I think I'm getting old. The technology is here already, but we need to ensure that technology will learn the right learning, not
Yes.
what we have in many companies that disconnected processes, people that are afraid of their jobs because technology is coming. So let's ensure that the right sequence, the right framework is implemented first. That
Mm.
would be my feedback.
That's some great advice there. And Dwayne, obviously, you provide leading edge technology at Canaxis, but what's your advice to customers that you work with to get the most successful implementations?
Yeah, I think ultimately data-driven insights requires accurate data. So that's one thing. Otherwise, any inference is going to be misguided. And so also finding the right places to harness AI, I think is a really critical aspect. So we can
Mm.
think of data cleansing and making sure that anomalies are detected and early correction of data that we're getting from lots of different sources. And also addressing problems that are open-ended with AI, I think in many cases.
Mm.
So when there is no correct answer, but we're trying to get some good guesses, that's a really good case for machine learning in many cases, because as an example of a forecast, there is no right answer of a forecast. Okay? Doing detailed mathematics is slightly different, and there are other approaches that are extremely powerful for solving actual mathematical problems where there is an answer that we're seeking. And as others have touched upon as well, automating incorrect decisions or inefficient decisions is obviously not a goal of AI. So it's
Mhm.
also
Mm.
about how do we improve upon the decisions that we're making currently. There will be some level of automation to that, but it does not take away from understanding how to solve problems efficiently, understanding how to react in different situations, and being able to provide that guidance, that oversight to AI. They can be supportive in many ways. It may be a matter of validating the outputs. It may be a matter of training it, but AI isn't an on switch to sudden planning nirvana. So
Yeah. Great. Some great advice there, Dwayne. Well, we're out of time now, so thank you for some great discussion there. It's been some really interesting insights, thoughts, kind of the wider perspective and considerations if you're trying to implement solutions to improve your supply chain optimization. Our next episode is the same time next week on Wednesday, the 3rd of December, and the subject is digital product passports, the catalyst for a new era of digital consumer engagement. So I'm sure that's going to be a fascinating discussion. I suspect as well that we'll be discussing blockchain as part of that subject, 'cause it is one of the areas where blockchain potentially has some great potential. So do join us next week for that. in terms of today's discussion, thank you for some great contributions from our audience. Elise Morgan, a Supply Chain Talk mug is on its way to you. Thank you for your contributions there. And finally, thank you to my guests, Lukasz Ziba from HighLogic, Daniel Milka from CAF, and Dwayne Smith from Kinaxis. Some great insights from you. Thank you to our audience, and do join us next week. Goodbye.